Hola clase, ¿cómo has estado? En este video de hoy vamos a hablar sobre los objetos indirectos. In the last video, we learned about direct objects and their pronouns. Today, we're going to be learning about indirect objects and their pronouns. So what are indirect objects? Indirect objects are nouns, just like direct objects. But indirect objects are nouns that indirectly receive the action of a verb. Let me show you what I mean with a couple examples. So the first example, I wrote a letter to Anita. So what did I write? I wrote a letter. Letter in this case is my direct object because it is what I am actually writing. It's directly receiving the action of my verb. But if we look at the other noun in our sentence at the end of the sentence, Anita, she's kind of indirectly receiving the action that I did in this sentence, which was writing, because I wrote a letter on her behalf. I wrote it to her. So she's getting she's indirectly receiving the action of my verb. In the next example, we made tacos for everyone. Well, it's pretty obvious what we made. So tacos is our direct objects, right? We didn't make everyone, we made tacos, but we made those tacos on their behalf. We made the tacos for everyone. So everyone is indirectly receiving the action of the verb made. So Anita and everyone are our indirect objects. Finding the indirect object in your sentence is really easy, and it's also similar to the way that we found direct objects in our sentence. All we have to do is find the verb in the sentence and then ask some questions. We're going to ask different questions than we did when we were looking for our direct objects, though. So the questions that we can ask when we're looking for our indirect objects are questions like to whom, or to what, or for whom, or for what, depending on if it's a person or a thing that's indirectly receiving the action of our verb. So for example, we planned a party for Marcella. We're going to look for our verb first. So we know that planned is our verb. And then we're going to ask to whom, or to what, or for whom, or for what did we plan a party. Now, sometimes it's helpful to go ahead and identify your direct object. So in this case, we know that party is our DO, right? Our direct object, because what did we plan? We planned a party. We didn't plan at Marcella. And then we can ask, so then for whom did we plan the party? Well, in this case, it's Marcella. And so Marcella is our indirect object because that's who we planned the party for. The next sentence there, Carlos read a story to the children. We'll look for our verb. So we've got read. Carlos read what? He read a story. We know that story is our direct object. And then we ask to whom or to what. We could ask for whom or for what, but in this case, to whom sounds good, right? To whom did Carlos read the story? And our answer is children. And that is our indirect object in this sentence. Now, you'll notice, just like with direct objects, that the indirect objects, they always come after the verb, all right? So the we in the beginning of the sentence and Carlos in the beginning of the sentence, they can't be they're not going to be our indirect objects, right? Those are our subjects. Those are nouns that are acting as our subjects. And so we don't even need to worry about those. And then our connecting words like for and to and the, those aren't going to be our indirect objects either. So we're looking for like people, places, and things that could be our indirect objects. And in this case, our indirect objects usually come towards the end of this sentence. All right, so let's do a little practice finding the indirect objects in Spanish, because of course it will be a little bit harder in Spanish than it is in English, because we've got to also translate the sentence and figure out what it's saying and what all the different words mean. So número uno, Megan manda invitaciones a todos tus amigos. So we find our verb, and you're going to see a lot of times we should check and see if there's a direct object first so that we don't get our direct and indirect object mixed up. So Megan sends what? Well, she sends invitations. And so that's our direct object. So we're not going to select that one. And so we can ask to whom. So like, who does she send all of these invitations to? Well, a todos tus amigos, we're looking for a noun. And so let's look towards the end of our sentence. We found a person, right? Person, places, and things are nouns. So amigos, did she send the invitations to her friends? Yeah, that sounds right. That's our indirect object there, amigos. Número dos, yo hago un pastel para Jose. So we found our verb, which is hago. Make. I make what? I make a cake. So un pastel is our direct object. That makes sense, right? And so then to whom or for whom? For whom did we make the cake? And we see para, that's just a connecting word. It means for. But we can see we do have another person at the end of our sentence, Jose. So we know that Jose is our IO. And as you can see, process of elimination, once we found our verb, once we found our direct object, it's pretty easy to find the indirect object in the sentence. And of course, remember that the indirect object can't come before the verb, so we know that it's not yo or anything like that. Número tres, nosotros nunca compramos regalos para nuestros padres. So we never buy gifts for our parents. That's kind of sad, right? So it might be tricky to find the verb here, but nunca, is never. So that's not your verb. Compramos is your verb. All right. What do we buy or what do we never buy? We never buy gifts. Regalos is gifts. So that's our direct object. That can't be our IO. So who do we never buy gifts for? Well, it's padres. So if we look at the end of the sentence there, padres, we will find our indirect object. Tú sirves refrescos a mí. You serve sodas or pops to me. And in this case, we've got our verb sirves. We ask, what do we serve? We serve refrescos, so that's our dio. And who do you serve refrescos to? Well, you serve them to me. So me is the indirect object. All right, so now that we've found our indirect objects in our sentences, let's talk about why we would want to use indirect object pronouns to replace these indirect objects. So once we've established what we're talking about in our sentence, we don't like to keep repeating those nouns over and over and over again. So in that first example, Megan sends invitations to all of her friends. Once we've established that she's sending invitations to her friends, later on in the conversation, if we repeat that phrase again to clarify or something like that, then we might want to use an indirect object pronoun to replace friend. So we could say something like, Megan sends invitations to them, or Megan sends them invitations. And we can get rid of friends and say them in their place. Them in this case would be an indirect object pronoun so that we don't have to repeat friends. I make a cake for Jose. I could say I make him a cake. If you know that I'm talking about Jose, I don't have to say Jose again. I can use a indirect object pronoun to get to the point and shorten my sentence. We never buy gifts for our parents. I can say we never buy them gifts because you know that I'm talking about parents, and so I can just say them, which is an indirect object pronoun in English. You serve sodas to me. Let's change that and just say you serve me sodas. And we can get rid of the me, our indirect object there at the end. So I want to show you then what our indirect object pronouns are in Spanish so you know how to replace your indirect objects with pronouns to be a little bit more specific and not be so redundant in your sentences. All right, so here are your indirect object pronouns. Notice that they are different, or at least, we have like a different list that we want to memorize than our direct object pronouns, even though some of them overlap. Think of them as two different sets. So me, we would use that for me. Te, we use that for you. Le is for him, her, and also for it. And then nos for us, and les is for them. All right. Now, I do want to point out that in English, we only have one set of pronouns that we call object pronouns. And we use those object pronouns for our direct and indirect objects. So we use me, you, him, her, it, us, and them to replace our direct objects. And we also use them to replace our indirect objects. Okay. So we only have one set. Keep in mind, though, that in Spanish, we have two different sets to pick from. Okay. And we can't just interchange them. It won't make sense in our sentence. So our indirect object pronouns are me, te, le, nos, les, but our direct object pronouns are me, te, lo, la, nos, los, and las. Now, yes, I know that you can see that there's some overlap there. The me and the te and the nos are the same either way, but it is really important to distinguish the difference because for our indirect objects pronouns, we use le and les, while for our direct object pronouns, we use lo, la, los, and las. All right, so just think of them as two different sets of pronouns. One set for our direct objects and one set for our indirect objects. Now, you have seen these pronouns, me, te, le, nos, and les before. We use these pronouns for our verb gustar, which makes sense because if you say the tacos are pleasing to me gustan los tacos, then you really are saying that you are the indirect object, right? The tacos are pleasing to whom? The tacos are pleasing to me. So I am the indirect object, which is why I say me gustan los tacos. All right, so here you can see that I have the sentences that we used when we were finding our indirect objects, and I have rewritten them, but I took out the indirect objects and I replaced them with an indirect object pronoun. So that first sentence read, Megan manda invitaciones a todos sus amigos, but I took off a todos sus amigos. I got rid of my indirect object and I replaced it with the indirect object pronoun les, and I shortened my sentence to Megan les manda invitaciones, period, which then is Megan sends them invitations. The second one there was yo hago un pastel para Jose, but I went ahead and got rid of para Jose. I changed Jose to le. So yo le hago un pastel. I make him a cake. Nosotros nunca compramos regalos para nuestros padres. Let's get rid of para nuestros padres. We replace them with an indirect object pronoun les. So nosotros nunca les compramos regalos. You can see that we're making our sentences just a little bit more short and concise. So we never buy them gifts. Tú me sirves refrescos. We shortened that from tu sirves refrescos a mí. We get rid of the a mí. We replace it with an indirect object pronoun me. So you serve me drinks or sodas. All right, so if you're wondering where to put your indirect object pronouns in the sentence, I have a really easy answer for you because indirect object pronouns follow the same rules for placement as direct object pronouns. So if you'll remember, rule number 1 says when there is one verb in a sentence, always place the pronoun in front of the verb. So I have two examples for you here. And in each example, there's only one verb. So you can see doy and mandan are our verbs in these sentences, and there's only one verb in each sentence. So yo doy un regalo a Nicole. If I want to get rid of my indirect object a Nicole and replace it with a pronoun, I'm going to put that pronoun in front of the verb. So yo le doy un regalo. I give her a gift. Notice that in English, we put the indirect object pronoun after the verb, but in Spanish, we put it before the verb when there's one verb in the sentence. Ellos mandan una invitación a ti. Let's say we're going to get rid of our indirect object. We're going to replace it with te, right? That's our pronoun that we want to replace that with. And since there's only one verb in the sentence, we're going to put it in front of the verb. So ellos te mandan una invitación. They send you an invitation. And here we have our second rule for pronoun placement. So when there are two verbs working together in a sentence, you can place the pronoun in front of the first verb, or you can attach it to the end of the second verb. So you have a choice here, all right? So if you have no queremos comprar un regalo para ti, we don't want to buy a gift for you. If you're going to replace your indirect object here with a pronoun, then you can either put that pronoun in front of the first verb, or you can attach it to the end of the second verb. And then you actually count back 3 vowels and put an accent mark above the O there. So it'd be no te queremos comprar un regalo, or no queremos comprarte un regalo. And either way, in English, it gets translated the same way, as we don't want to buy a gift for you. That next sentence there, Julia está comprando un regalo para mí. If you look, está comprando, there's two verbs here that are working together in this sentence. And so if we want to get rid of our indirect object, me, and replace it with the pronoun me, we can either put the me after the second verb, we can attach it to the end of the second verb, all right? So Julia está comprándome un regalo, or we can put it in front of the first verb. So Julia me está comprando un regalo. And in English, that gets translated as Julia is buying me a gift. All right, so I just want to mention one more quick thing, and it's that you are allowed to be redundant in Spanish when it comes to indirect objects and their pronouns, all right? So as you can see in my examples here, you can use your indirect objects and your indirect objects pronouns in the same sentence, all right, if you want to. And that's weird because we can't do that in English, and we can't do that in Spanish when it comes to direct objects and their pronouns. But when it comes to indirect objects and their pronouns, we can actually leave both of them in the same sentence and be a little bit repetitive, all right? And so we'll talk more about this in class, and kind of why you're allowed to do this or why you would want to do this. But I do want you to be aware that this exists, and that you can do this and that people will do this when they're speaking and writing in Spanish.